The sky over I-5 decided to take a leak. Not a drizzle, not a shower, a full-on fire hose to the face downpour, the kind of rain that makes your wipers scream and turns the highway into a black, angry river. My rig, the Big Samantha, was slicing through it like a hot knife through butter, all 80,000 pounds of her. My world was just the rhythm of the wipers, thwack-thwump, thwack-thwump, and the low growl of the cat engine under my feet. I was 100 miles out from nowhere, fueled by a gas station chili dog that was already staging a protest in my gut. It wasn't just a protest. It was a full-blown insurrection, a declaration of war from my lower intestine. My guts were churning like a cement mixer full of angry hornets. All I wanted was to make it to the next truck stop, find a burger that didn't taste like regret, and maybe introduce that chili dog to the porcelain god of the men's room for a lengthy and violent negotiation. That's when I saw the hazard lights. A sad little blink, blink, blink in the roaring dark, like a dying firefly. Some four-door sedan, probably a rental, dead on the shoulder, hood up, like it was praying for a miracle from the automotive gods. My first thought, my trucker's instinct, was to just keep rolling. Not my circus, not my monkeys. I got a schedule to keep and a belly full of bad decisions. Time is money, and stopping for some poor sap on the shoulder is usually a one-way ticket to losing an hour and gaining a headache. But then my headlights, cutting through the deluge like twin laser beams, caught something. A figure, standing by the car door, getting absolutely biblically drenched. I slowed the Kenworth, the air brakes hissing their disapproval, a long, drawn-out pshh that sounded like the world's biggest can of soda being opened. The whole rig shuddered as I geared down, the engine note dropping to a bass rumble that vibrated through the floor and up my spine. As I got closer, my high beams lit her up, and my heart did a goddamn kickflip in my chest, followed by a double gainer that would have won gold at the Olympics. The chili dog was momentarily forgotten, its rebellion quelled by a sudden rush of adrenaline, and something a whole lot more primal. It wasn't some dude in a wrinkled suit with a flat tire and a worse attitude. It was a woman, and she was wearing a maid's uniform, a short, black dress, the kind that was already pushing the legal limits of shortness when it was dry. Now soaked and plastered to her skin, it was practically painted on. It wasn't just clinging. It had fused with her, becoming a second, shinier skin that reflected the pulsing yellow of her hazard lights. A little white apron, bright against the black, was clinging to her waist for dear life, its strings a sad, soggy mess. Her hair was a chaos of wet, dark strands, stuck to her face and neck, and she was shivering, hugging herself against a wind that was throwing sheets of rain at her sideways. She looked like a mermaid who'd made a very bad deal with a sea witch and ended up on the shoulder of an interstate. My brain short-circuited. A dame like that, stranded in a storm, in that outfit. Forget the chili dog, forget the truck stop, forget Phoenix. This was a 5-alarm, DEFCON 1, holy crap on a cracker situation. Sam McCarty doesn't leave a damsel in distress. It's against my personal code, right there in Chapter 1, Section 3. If she's got curves and she's in trouble, you hit the brakes. Especially not a damsel who looks like she just walked out of one of my better dreams, the kind you don't tell your priest about. I flicked on my blinker, the tick-tock of it, loud in the suddenly silent cab, and pulled the Big Samantha onto the shoulder ahead of her, preparing to play the part of a big, fat knight in shining armor, or, a knight in a diesel-stained flannel shirt with a chili dog problem. Same difference. The rig settled with a groan, and a final shuddering sigh of air brakes that sounded like a giant exhaling after a long day. The rain was hammering on the roof of the cab, a deafening drum solo played by an angry god. I stared into my side mirror, the glass vibrating, distorting her image in the pulsing yellow of my hazards. She just stood there, a small dark shape against the chaos, looking at my massive truck like it was a spaceship that had just landed from Planet Save-A-Ho. She looked small, lost, and so unbelievably wet it was a miracle she hadn't dissolved into a puddle on the asphalt. Her shoulders were hunched, and I could see the violent tremors of her shivering even from 50 feet away. I hit the button, and the passenger window slid down with an electric whine that cut through the storm's racket. A spray of cold mist immediately blasted my face, waking me up better than a cup of truck stop coffee. It smelled of wet asphalt and ozone. "Hey, you all right over there, darling?" I yelled, my voice booming out into the wet darkness, deeper and more resonant than I expected. She jumped, startled, like a deer caught in the high beams. Her head snapped toward the sound of my voice. Through the curtain of rain I could see her eyes, big and dark, wide with a mix of fear and what looked like a last shred of hope. She took a hesitant step closer to the cab, her cheap-looking black heels sinking slightly into the soft shoulder. The mud was probably ruining them, but I got the feeling that was the least of her worries. She had to shout back, her voice thin and reedy against the roar of the rain, barely carrying over the deluge. "My car! It just died. No lights, no radio, nothing." "Yeah, looks like she gave up the ghost," I hollered back, injecting as much non-serial killer friendliness as I could into my voice. It's a fine line to walk when you're a 300-pound dude in a giant truck at night. The alternator, probably. "No sense in you drowning out there trying to fix it. Get in. I'll get you to the next town. No problem." I leaned all 300 pounds of my glorious corn-fed American frame across the cab, my flannel shirt straining at the buttons, and shoved the passenger door open. It swung out with a heavy, solid clank, a metallic invitation into the warm, dry, diesel-scented world of my truck. The interior dome light flicked on, spilling a welcoming yellow glow onto the wet ground below. She looked at the open door, then back at her dead little sedan, a dark, useless lump of metal in the rear view. Then she looked up and down the dark, empty highway, stretching into infinity in both directions. I could practically see the gears turning in her head, the calculation in her eyes. Big stranger in a big truck in the middle of a storm. It's the opening scene to 100 horror movies. But staying out there was a guaranteed ticket to pneumonia, and that was a movie with a much crappier ending. She made her choice. She scurried through the rain, a frantic little dash, and I got my first real close-up. My God, the uniform wasn't just clinging to her. It was a vacuum-sealed second skin. The cheap black polyester was so soaked it was almost transparent, and the harsh glare of my cab light rendered it practically invisible. I could see the outline of her bra, a simple white one, the delicate lace trim at the top, the curve of her belly button, the faint line of her hips, everything. The little white apron was plastered to her thighs, its strings tied in a desperate, soggy little bow at the small of her back. She was a walking, shivering work of art, sculpted by a rainstorm. Then came the main event, the climb. Getting into a Kenworth W900 ain't like stepping into a Prius. It's a 3-step vertical journey to heaven. It's a challenge for me, and I own the damn thing. For a woman her size, in heels, in a storm, it was Mount Everest. She put a small soaked black shoe on the first metal step, grabbed the chrome handle, and pulled. Her skirt, which was already fighting a losing battle with modesty, surrendered completely. It rode up and up and up, like a theater curtain on opening night. For a solid 10 seconds that will be forever burned into the highlight reel of my memory, my world was the back of her smooth, tanned thighs and a pair of simple, practical, and utterly devastating white cotton panties. They were soaked, too, clinging to the perfect heart-shaped curve of her backside, like they were molded there by the gods of trucking themselves. My breath hitched in my throat. My knuckles went white on the steering wheel. I felt a bead of sweat roll down my temple, and it had absolutely nothing to do with the humidity. She finally tumbled into the passenger seat with a soft whoomp and a gasp, pulling the heavy door shut behind her. The roar of the storm was instantly muffled, cut off, replaced by a new, more intense symphony of sounds. Her ragged, shaky breathing, the drip, drip, drip of water pooling on the rubber floor mat from her soaked clothes, and the frantic, syncopated hammering of my own heart against my ribs. The cab, my rolling fortress of solitude, my kingdom of flannel and beef jerky, suddenly felt like it had shrunk by half. It was now a 2-person lifeboat in a hurricane. The air was instantly thick with the smell of rain, wet fabric, and her. It was a clean scent, like fresh laundry and maybe a hint of some flowery soap, but underneath it was a warm, female musk that went straight to the back of my brain and set up a goddamn marching band. It was the scent of life, of woman, and it was overwhelming the familiar, comforting smells of diesel and old coffee. "Oh, thank you so much," she chattered, her teeth clicking together from the cold like a wind-up toy. She tried to pull her skirt down, but the wet fabric just stuck stubbornly to her legs, refusing to budge. A dark, embarrassed blush crept up her neck and painted her cheeks, visible even in the dim green glow of the dash. "Don't you worry about a thing," I said, my voice coming out a little rougher, a little more gravelly than I intended. I cranked the heater dial all the way up to volcano. The vents roared to life, pumping hot, dry air into the cab like a dragon's breath. "Name's Sam, and you are freezing your pretty little behind off." "Maria," she said, rubbing her arms vigorously, trying to generate some friction, some heat. Her skin was covered in goosebumps, little bumps that I wanted to trace with my finger. "Thank you, Sam. You are a lifesaver. I really thought I was going to be stuck out there all night." "Happy to be of service, Maria." I put the truck in gear with a deep, satisfying clunk and eased us back onto the highway, the 18 wheels finding their groove on the wet pavement. The heat was already working its magic. Steam started to rise from her clothes, little ghosts of vapor dancing in the dim green and orange light from the dashboard. It made the air even thicker, even more intimate. The windows started to fog up from the inside, sealing us in our own private, steamy little world. I rummaged around in the space between the seats, pushing aside a half-empty bag of sunflower seeds and an old road atlas. I found what I was looking for, a semi-clean towel I keep for emergencies. It smelled faintly of fabric softener and me. "Here," I said, handing it to her. "It ain't 5-star hotel quality, but it's dry." Our fingers brushed as she took it. A little jolt, like static electricity on a dry day, shot up my arm. Her skin was ice-cold, her fingers delicate against my calloused paw. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes meeting mine for a second. They were the color of dark chocolate, and right now they were full of a gratitude so profound it was almost tangible. She started dabbing at her face and hair, and the simple act was mesmerizing. Every move she made caused the wet uniform to shift, to reveal, to hint. I was trying to watch the road, I swear to God I was, but my eyes had developed a mind of their own. They were traitors, every one of them, constantly flicking over to her, to the way the thin, wet fabric stretched taut across her chest with every deep breath she took, to the elegant line of her throat as she tilted her head back to dry her hair, to the glorious, glorious legs that seemed to go on forever, disappearing into the shadows below the dash. "It's so warm in here," she sighed after a minute, a little of the shiver leaving her voice. She sounded like she was melting. Her whole body seemed to relax into the plush captain's chair. "I run a tight ship," I said, trying for a joke, trying to sound normal and not like a drooling wolf. "And a warm cab. Can't have my cargo getting cold." She gave a small laugh, and the sound was like music over the low rumble of the engine. It was a genuine, pretty sound. She finished with the towel, wringing out her wet hair, and then, with a shy glance at me, she started to blot at her dress. She dabbed at her chest, her stomach, her thighs. I nearly drove us into the median. It was like watching someone try to put out a forest fire with a water pistol. The dress wasn't getting any drier, but my imagination was getting a hell of a workout, running wild and buck-naked through the fields of depravity. We drove in a tense, buzzing silence for a few miles, the only sounds the thwack-thwump of the wipers and the hum of the heater. I watched her change. The shivering stopped, replaced by a new kind of energy. Her body language shifted. The damsel in distress was fading away, and someone else was emerging. Her eyes, which had been half-closed in relief, were now wide open and darting around the cab. It wasn't a curious glance. It was a professional assessment, a critical scan. Her nose wrinkled just a little, as if she'd smelled something foul. Uh-oh. I knew that look. I'd seen it on my mother's face. I'd seen it on waitresses when I left a messy table. It was the look of a woman who spots a spider on the wall, a woman who sees a single dirty dish in an otherwise clean sink. It was the look of a professional cleaner who had just been locked inside my rolling man cave. And my man cave was, to put it mildly, not up to code. It was my home, my castle, and it was decorated in a style I like to call early American slob. "Is everything okay?" I asked, a sense of dread creeping up my spine like a cold snake. The chili dog in my gut rumbled in agreement, sensing a new disturbance in the force. Her gaze landed on the passenger side window, right next to her face. It was fogged over, and I could just make out the greasy handprint I'd probably left on it last week while eating a slice of pizza. She stared at it, her brow furrowed in deep concentration. Then, as if she couldn't physically stop herself, she reached out with the damp towel and wiped a small, perfect circle clean. She looked at the clean circle, then at the fog and grime around it. Her lips tightened into a thin, determined line. "This fog," she murmured, more to herself than to me. "It leaves streaks, and the dust. It sticks to the condensation." Before I could respond, to defend the honor of my cab's natural patina, she was in motion. She reached into one of the surprisingly deep pockets of her little white apron. I was half expecting a wallet or keys. What she pulled out was a neatly folded, perfectly clean, bright blue microfiber cloth. She was armed and dangerous. She started with the window, wiping it down with long, methodical, overlapping strokes until it was crystal clear, gleaming in the dash lights. Her technique was flawless. The precision was hypnotic. Then she turned her attention inward. Her eyes narrowed, locking onto their next victim. My dashboard. My dash is my office, my command center. It's got my logbook, a crumpled map of Wyoming, a family-sized bag of sunflower seeds with a small hole leaking shells onto the floor, a stack of greasy receipts from diners in 3 states, and a fine layer of dust from at least 12 different states. To me, it's organized chaos. To Maria, it was a declaration of war. "Oh, no, no, no," she whispered, shaking her head slowly. The words were filled with a genuine, heartfelt horror, like she'd just stumbled upon a crime scene. "This is not sanitary, at all. It's just a little dust," I said weakly, feeling like I needed to defend my lifestyle choices. "Road seasoning, it gives the place character." She wasn't listening. She was in the zone. She leaned forward, the microfiber cloth held like a weapon, ready for battle. A man's workspace should be clear, for a clear mind, for efficiency. And then she went to work. She stretched across the center console, her body contorting in the tight space to reach the far side of the dash. The movement pushed her right up against me. Her hip was pressed firmly against my right thigh. I could feel the warmth of her through my jeans, a focused point of heat that was spreading through my entire leg. The sweet, clean scent of her hair, now starting to dry, filled my nostrils, overpowering everything else. The little white bow of her apron was practically tickling my arm. And that skirt, Lord have mercy on my trucker soul, that skirt. As she leaned over, it hiked up again, giving me a full, unobstructed, high-definition, panoramic view of her backside. Those perfect white-clad curves were just inches from my face. I could see the faint outline where the wet cotton was pressed against her skin, the gentle curve where her thigh met her hip. My grip on the steering wheel was turning into a death grip. The truck was doing 65 miles an hour on a slick highway, but my world had slowed to a crawl. The only things that existed were the steady rumble of the engine, the hot air blasting from the vents, and the glorious, magnificent sight of Maria's ass as she waged a holy war on my dusty dashboard. "You have so many crumbs," she declared, her voice a little muffled because she was practically lying on the center console, her face inches from my logbook. She used the edge of the cloth to sweep a mountain of sunflower seed shells into her cupped hand. "This is how you get ants, or worse, mice." "Mice?" I croaked, my voice cracking like a pubescent teenager's. "In a moving vehicle?" "Pests are very determined," she said gravely, as if she were a general discussing an enemy invasion. "They find a way, especially for salt." I was losing the ability to form coherent thoughts. The battle in my head, professionalism versus primal urge, round 2, was in full swing, and primal urge was holding my head underwater and laughing. The truck drifted a little to the right, kissing the shoulder. The rumble strip screamed at me, "Brat!" A violent vibration shot through the cab. I jerked the wheel back, my heart pounding a hole in my ribs. Maria didn't even notice. She was in a cleaning trance. A state of pure, unadulterated focus. She finished the dash, leaving it gleaming like the day it left the factory in Ohio. She sat back for a second, a flicker of pride in her dark eyes. I took a deep, shaky breath, thinking, praying that the ordeal was over. I was a fool, a naive, hopeful, idiotic fool. Her gaze, now sharp and relentless as a hawk's, fell upon the holiest of holies. My gear stick, the mighty Eaton Fuller 18-speed, my scepter, my partner in this long-haul dance. It stood tall and proud between the seats, capped with a chrome and leather knob. And to Maria's trained eye, it was filthy, a monument to grime. She pointed a finger at it, not the cloth, but her actual finger, which was somehow more intimidating. "And this," she said, her voice dropping to a low, serious whisper that sent a bolt of lightning straight down my spine, and pooled in my groin. This is the heart of the truck, the control center, and it is very, very dirty. I looked at my gear stick. Okay, maybe it was a little grimy from thousands of miles of my sweaty, calloused palm. Maybe there was a hint of fossilized ketchup on the shaft from a rogue French fry incident 2 weeks ago in Nebraska. To me, it had character. Patina. To her, it was a public health crisis on a stick. She tucked the blue microfiber cloth away, and from another mysterious apron pocket produced a small, clear spray bottle filled with a bluish liquid and a soft, plush white polishing rag. She gave the rag a few spritzes. A sharp, powerful lemon scent exploded into the cab, a scent that screamed clean with the force of a drill sergeant. Then she reached out, her small warm hand wrapped around the round chrome knob at the top of my stick shift. My entire nervous system went on strike. Every muscle in my body froze solid. The rebellious chili dog in my stomach did a backflip with a half-twist. I stopped breathing. The air was trapped in my lungs, hot and heavy. She started to polish the knob. Gently at first, her thumb working the cloth in slow, deliberate, hypnotic circles. Her brow was furrowed with intense concentration. "You have to work the polish in," she murmured, almost to herself, her voice a low purr that vibrated through the air. "To break down the oils and bring out the natural shine. You can't just wipe it. You have to massage it." Then she moved her hand down. She gripped the shaft, the long black leather-wrapped shaft, and she began to work it, up and down, a firm, steady, rhythmic motion. Her hand was a blur of focused energy. The leather of my captain's chair groaned in protest as I shifted my weight, trying to find a position that was less stimulating. It was no use. I could feel the vibrations from her vigorous scrubbing traveling up the stick, through the floorboards, and directly into the base of the driver's seat. It was like sitting on a giant rumbling tuning fork that was playing my favorite song. The grime. It gets stuck deep in the grooves of the leather, she explained, her breathing getting a little heavier with the effort, a delicate sheen of sweat appearing on her upper lip. You must use pressure, a lot of pressure, to work it all out. You have to be firm, but not rough. I made a noise, a strangled, pathetic whimper that was mercifully swallowed by the engine's roar. A semi-truck blew past us in the fast lane, its horn blaring a deep, resonant bram, and I barely even registered it. My universe had shrunk to the sight of her hand, her determined face illuminated by the dash lights and the increasingly shiny state of my gear stick. "It's getting so smooth now," she said, a note of triumph in her voice. She picked up the pace, faster, harder, round and round the knob, then a long, firm stroke, all the way down the shaft, then back up again. The whole stick was bucking in its housing with the force of her polishing. A dirty stick. It can get stuck. It will not slide into gear properly. You get a grinding noise when you try to force it. Grinding is bad, I managed to force out, my voice sounding like I'd been gargling gravel and sand. Very, very bad for the transmission. "Exactly," she said, looking up at me with a bright, earnest, and completely innocent smile that just about killed me. "You understand. A clean stick is a happy stick. It makes for a smoother ride for everyone." I didn't understand a damn thing, except that if she kept this up for another 30 seconds, I was going to black out and wake up in a ditch in another state with a massive grin on my face. I had to do something. I had to stop this madness. I flicked my blinker on and muscled the big Samantha onto the shoulder again, bringing the 80,000-pound rig to a shuddering halt. The rain was still coming down in sheets, a gray curtain isolating us from the world. "What's wrong?" she asked, her hand finally stilling on the stick, her palm resting warmly on the now gleaming knob. "Did I do something? Engines, making a funny noise." I lied, my brain scrambling for a plausible excuse. "Overheating. The rain. Gotta let it cool down for a minute." It was the worst lie I'd ever told, but it was all I had. She accepted this without question, her attention immediately returning to her task. She gave the gear stick one last loving buff with the cloth, then held her head to the side, admiring her handiwork like a sculptor admiring his David. It was magnificent. The chrome gleamed like a mirror. The black shaft shone with a deep, rich luster. It looked like a museum piece. "There," she sighed, sitting back in her seat, a satisfied flush on her cheeks from the exertion. "Perfect. Now it will move so easily for you. It will slide into every gear, smooth as silk." "Maria," I said, my voice thick with a dozen different emotions. I'm speechless. It's beautiful. I'm afraid to touch it now. I'll get it dirty again." She laughed, a full, throaty sound that made my toes curl inside my boots. "Don't be silly, Sam. It is made to be handled. That's its purpose. And if it gets dirty again, you know who to call." That sentence just about did me in. I sat there, engine idling, wipers slapping time, my mind a complete and total blank. I thought I'd survived. I thought the cleaning frenzy was over. But then her eyes, those sharp, all-seeing, terrifyingly perceptive eyes, drifted past my shoulder to the dark red curtain separating the cab from the sleeper berth. "And what is behind the curtain?" she asked, her voice full of a dangerous, insatiable curiosity. "The sleeper," I said, my blood running cold. I pictured it in my mind's eye. The unmade bed, a twisted hellscape of sheets and blankets, the battlefield of my dirty laundry, piled in a corner like a fallen monument to bachelorhood, the empty pizza box from last night, greasy and forlorn on the floor. It was a horror show, a slob's paradise, a petri dish of epic proportions. It's just where I sleep. Her eyes narrowed. She had sensed it, the source of all the filth, the final boss, the heart of the darkness. Without another word, she unbuckled her seatbelt. In the cramped space of the cab, she maneuvered past the console, her body brushing against mine in a dozen electrifying, agonizing ways. Her arm brushed my chest, her leg pressed against mine, the heat of her skin searing me through my clothes. She reached the curtain. With the dramatic flourish of an archaeologist opening a cursed tomb, she yanked it aside. A gasp, a genuine, soul-shattering gasp of pure, unadulterated horror. She turned to look at me, her face a mask of disbelief, and was that excitement? No, not excitement. It was purpose. So it was the look of a doctor who'd just been presented with the most fascinatingly diseased patient of her entire career. "Sam," she said, her voice trembling with a potent cocktail of shock and righteous resolve. "This is not a bedroom. This is a biohazard. You could get a fungus, a serious one." Before I could defend my right to cultivate new and interesting life forms in my laundry pile, she disappeared behind the curtain into the gloom of the sleeper. I heard rustling, a thump, as she lightly tossed a pile of my jeans onto the floor, a muttered Spanish phrase that probably meant, "Mother of God, what have I gotten myself into?" A minute later, her head poked back out from behind the curtain. Her hair was wild, a smudge of dust was on her cheek, like war paint, and her eyes were gleaming with an insane, brilliant light of a true zealot. "Sam," she whispered urgently, her voice low and conspiratorial. "I am trying to make the bed, but the sheets, they are all tangled. It's a complete disaster. I am stuck." She bit her lip, a look of pure, unadulterated frustration on her face. "I cannot get free. The fitted sheet, it has me trapped. You must come help me. We have to wrestle these sheets into submission. Together." I killed the engine. The cab fell into an almost holy silence, broken only by the relentless drumming of the rain on the aluminum roof. I stared at her, stuck, in my bed, needing my help to wrestle with sheets. "Right," I said, my voice a low growl that seemed to come from the soles of my feet. "Can't have tangled sheets. Bad for sleeping. Causes poor circulation." I unbuckled my belt and hoisted my bulk out of the driver's seat. The journey of 3 feet from the cab into the sleeper felt like crossing the Rubicon. I pushed the heavy curtain aside and stepped in. The air back here was even hotter, even closer, thick with the scent of unwashed Sam and her floral perfume. The windows were completely opaque with condensation, little rivers of water tracing paths down the glass. She had already managed to pile my dirty clothes into one impressively neat corner, but she was, as advertised, tangled in my fitted sheet, which had come half off the mattress. She was on her knees on the bed, wrapped in a cotton prison, pulling at a corner that was stubbornly wedged under the mattress. "See?" she said, looking up at me from her position on the bed, her face flushed and beaded with sweat. "It has me. It won't let go." "Looks like a real stubborn one," I said, my eyes drinking in the sight of her, kneeling on my bed, wrapped in my sheets, in that ridiculous, wonderful, soaking wet uniform. The little white apron was askew. Her skirt was bunched up around her thighs. It was chaos. Beautiful, perfect chaos. I knelt on the mattress opposite her. The space was so tight our knees bumped. The mattress dipped under my weight, rolling her slightly toward me. I could feel the furnace-like heat coming off her skin. I could smell her perfume, her sweat, the rain, all of it mingling into an intoxicating, head-spinning cocktail. "Okay," I rumbled, reaching out to grab a corner of the demonic sheet. My hand brushed hers. Another jolt of electricity. On 3, we pull, hard, and we pulled, we wrestled. We fought those goddamn sheets. The wrestling required a lot of leverage, a lot of pushing and pulling in very close quarters. Our bodies collided. The whole truck began to rock on its suspension. A gentle sway at first, then something more, rhythmic. The small enclosed space became a sauna. We were straightening the pillows, which required a lot of vigorous back-and-forth motion. We were tucking the corners, a task that somehow required her to be on top of me, pressing down with all her weight to get the right angle. We were testing the mattress for structural integrity, which involved a great deal of bouncing and groaning, from the suspension, of course. The truck rocked and swayed, a steady beat, as we buffed the headboard with our bodies and shook out the dust bunnies with a series of powerful, rhythmic jolts. She climbed on top of me to get a better angle for folding the heavy comforter, her knees on either side of my hips, her body moving in perfect sync with mine as we worked. We were a tangle of arms and legs and hot, slick skin, a whirlwind of furious, focused organizing. I don't know how long it lasted. Time ceased to exist back there. There was only the heat, the sweat, the fogged-up windows, and the steady groaning rhythm of the big Samantha rocking on the shoulder of I-5 in the middle of a thunderstorm. It was the most intense, thorough, and soul-satisfying deep clean of my entire life. Every inch of that sleeper was serviced, polished, brought to a gleaming finish. Eventually the storm inside the cab passed, mirroring the one outside which had softened to a gentle patter. We lay on the now perfectly made bed, tangled in sheets that were definitely not dry, gasping for air in the humid haze. Every muscle in my body hummed with a pleasant, exhausted ache. I felt pristine, purified, and I was grinning like a madman who'd just won the lottery. Maria stirred beside me, propping herself on an elbow. Her hair was a glorious wreck. Her uniform was twisted, and even wetter than before, somehow, and a slow, sleepy, satisfied smile was on her lips. She looked around the now spotless sleeper. It looked like a hotel room, a 5-star one. Even the pizza box was gone, neatly folded, and tucked away into a trash bag she'd produced from God knows where. "There," she sighed, her voice husky and low, "all clean." She slowly, gracefully, untangled herself from me and stood up on the floor. With a few professional tugs and smooths, she put her uniform back into some semblance of order. She leaned down and gave me a kiss. It was slow, deep, and tasted of victory, lemons, and her. "My stop was a few miles back, Sam." She whispered against my mouth, her breath warm. "The exit for the Hendersons' estate. I should go." "I could turn around," I said, my voice hoarse. "Take you right to the door." She just smiled, a secret, knowing smile, and squeezed my hand. A good maid never reveals her secrets. Besides, the job is done. Then she slipped out of the sleeper, hopped down from the cab with an agility that stunned me, and vanished into the misty rain, which had finally almost stopped. I watched in my side mirror until her silhouette disappeared into the pre-dawn gloom. I lay there for a long time, listening to the rain die down to nothing. Finally, with a groan, I hauled my spent, aching, glorious body back into the driver's seat. The cab was cool now. The windows were clearing. I fired up the engine, the familiar rumble a comforting friend. I reached for the gear stick, my beautiful gleaming holy gear stick, and my hand froze. Hanging from my rearview mirror, gently swaying, was a small, laminated cardboard sign, the kind they hang on hotel doorknobs. On it, in crisp, polite, professional letters, it read, "Do not disturb," and tucked into the clip beneath it, like a little gift, was her bright blue microfiber cloth and the tiny spray bottle of lemon cleaner. A parting gift. A souvenir from the cleanest night of my life. I leaned my head back against the headrest and let out a laugh. A big, booming, gut-busting laugh that filled the cleanest damn cab on the entire interstate system. To hell with the burger. I just had a 5-course meal with dessert. Phoenix could wait. First I needed a nap. A very, very undisturbed nap.